of the month of Kislev, and we are, Baruch Hashem, a few days into Hanukkah already, continuing to daven for our brothers and sisters in Australia and throughout the world, that Hashem Baruch, the lights of Hanukkah should inspire all of our hearts and our homes and our souls and our minds to a greater world, to more iris, and please God, to an end to all of the tsaras. We are holding at the bottom of Daf Ayin Vav Amud Aleph, the last two words on the line, last two words of the page. Moving on, let's jump to our Amud for today, which is Ayin Vav Amud Beis. We have a lot of important halachas and concepts in Hilchos Kashrus to discuss, and to that end, Rav tells us at the bottom of Ayin Vav Amud Aleph, last two words. Amar Rav tells us, turning on to Ayin Vav Amud Beis, Basar Shchut Shamin. If you have shechted kosher meat, meaning meat that is kosher, shechted appropriately, that is shamin, that is fatty, shetzalai, that you roasted it together with, basar nevela kochosh, a shriveled up, very lean piece of non-kosher, meaning nevela meat. What's the metzius here? So Rashi points out that what we're talking about here is you made two kebabs, one of kosher meat, which was delicious, all stacked up on your kebab is good, delicious, fatty kosher meat, and on your second kebab is lean, shriveled up non-kosher meat. And what did you do? You put them in the same oven, not touching each other. Rashi tells us, "Zerochik mizeh," says Rashi. That's what we're talking about. They're far away from each other. There's no touching involved whatsoever. Says the Gemara, quoting from Rav, Osir, the kosher meat is now going to become forbidden. Why? My timer. What's the reason? Mefatme mehadadi. They are going to become fattened from each other. Now, obviously, the kosher meat is the one that has the fat in it. The non-kosher meat, in this case, is lean. It doesn't have any fat in it. How exactly does this work? Says Rashi, how does it operate? Sharech min Hashem, the second line of Rashi, Sharech min Hashemin, that the odor of the fat, nichnas lekachush, goes into the lean non-kosher meat, umefatmai, and fattens it up. V'chayzer zeh u'metzir reach, and now it's going to exude flavor. It's going to exude odor. Gamhu, that one as well. And therefore, that flavor is now going to go into the kosher meat. Says Rashi, obviously, v'kol sheken shchuta, shchuta chushen veleshmein. Obviously, if it was the other way around, and the non-kosher meat would be fatty and the kosher meat would be lean, so in that case, obviously, it would all be treif. The whole thing would be not kosher. And Rav is telling us the more extreme case to illustrate this point. Says the Gemara, Levi Amar, Levi tells us, even if you had lean kosher meat with that was roasted with these two kebabs, exactly the same situation, with very fatty nevela meat in basar nevela shamit, mutter, the whole thing will be mutter. So you have a machlokes here. Is there going to be a transfer of flavor in this situation? What is the machlokes? This is a very important machlokes. My timer, what is the reason behind this machlokes? Says the Gemara, Reicha ba'alma hu, v'reicha lav milsehi. The concern is one exclusively of reicha, of odor. There is no transfer of flavor that happens through a liquid medium or through touching. There is only reicha. There is only the odor that is being exuded here. The reicha and the odor, lav milsehi, according to Levi, is irrelevant. Meaning, the odor of something is not something that is going to transfer any kind of flavor, and therefore we are not going to assume that the odor of the non-kosher meat is going to go into the kosher meat, and that is, even if it does, it would be irrelevant. That is not going to transfer flavor to the extent that it's going to make anything awesome. Says the Gemara, not only did Levi hold like this in theory, he held like this in practice. Avat Levi uvda bei reish galusa. Levi, in fact, did this in the house of the reish galusa, bigdi v'davar acher, with a gdi, with a goat, v'davar acher. Davar acher is a euphemism for a pig. Rashi says chazer. He didn't want to say chazer. So bigdi v'davar acher with a gdi and another thing. Okay. Meisive. Now we have a question. A question on this whole sugya. We have a brisa that tells us that you're not allowed to roast two korban pesachs together. Why? Because we're worried about mixing things up. My love tarevis tamim. Does that not mean that we're worried about the transference of flavor from one to the other through recha, through oda, v'kasha levi, and then this would be a contradiction to Levi Shita. Says the Gemara, no, lie. What are you concerned about if you put two korban pesachs in the same oven, the same roasting fire? We're worried about tarevis gufin. We're worried about that you're going to get mixed up which is which. And then you have the one chabura taking the wrong pesach, another chabura also taking the wrong pesach, and then you're going to have a korban pesach that's eaten by people that are not the menuyim on the korban pesach. That's why it's also to roast them together. Each pesach needs its own fire. And this also makes a tremendous amount of sense. Why? Because the end of that brisa is afilu gdiva tzleh. Even if the two pesachs that you have, one is a gdi, one is a goat, and one is a tzleh alam. Says the Gemara, if you are concerned because of the switching around of the korbanos, that's exactly why the brisa teaches I feel gdi v'telah. Even if it's a gdi and a telah, meaning even if one is one kind of animal, another one is another kind of animal. Because what are you concerned about? Yeah, it's a little bit more difficult to be confused between these two things. But you can imagine like a fat gedi and a skinny lamb that are going to be, once you skin them, you could get confused between them in theory. But that would make sense if we said afilu, even if it's a gedi and it's lamb. But if you're going to tell me that you're worried about the flavor, why do I care about the gedi and the tzleh? Why would you have to tell me even if one is a goat and one is a sheep? Who cares? Mali gedi ugdi. What difference does it make it if it's a goat and a goat? I mean, that you would say an even. Says Elamai, you have to say Al is Gufit. That the whole concern of the Brisa is because of the concern of Gufit. Who the Asr? That's why it's Asr. About Tarav is Tam Mishari. But a transfer of flavor as a result of Recha, as a result of the Oda, that would be mutter. Says the Gemara, so well, now that we've explained this Brisa like this, now this is a refutation against Rav, because the Brisa seems to be telling you that transfer of flavor through the medium of Oda is not a thing. We don't have to be concerned about that. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, says Rabbi Yirmiyah, not so fast. What are we talking about? Like if you cooked it b'shtei kederis, you cooked it in two kederis, two separate pots. Says the Gemara, whoa. B'shtei kederis al kedaitich? Since when do you make a korban pesach in a pot ever? That would be a problem. You have to have a tzliyesh, it has to be roasted. When are you ever going to have the korban pesach in a pot? Ela ema, rather you have to say, no, what Rabbi Yirmiyah is telling us is ke'ein, shtei kederis, that they are being roasted in such a way that it was as if it was in two separate pots. This is what we're saying. We don't roast two pesachs together, mibnei tarevis, because we're worried about them getting mixed up. My tarevis, what tarevis are we talking about here? Tarevis tamim, we're worried about a transfer of flavor. Va'afilu ke'ein shtei kederis, and even if it would be as if it was in two pots. What does that mean? It's as if it is in two pots. So Rashi says, shipud mikan, v'shipud mikan, v'tel gadol shel gechalim ha'avar be'emsa. You have one spit on the one side and another spit on the other side. And you have a mechitza in the middle of like coals or dirt or something, meaning that there's no way of it touching at all. That's what it means, ke'ein shtei kederis, as if it was in two separate pots. It says, I feel ke'ein shtei kederis, even if it would be like in two separate pots, the lekadar of time, that there's no transfer of flavor through touching or through liquid or through anything. Also, mishum, that would be forbidden. Why? Mishum tarav is gufin. Because of the possibility of mixing up the bodies, meaning mixing up the actual karbanos. And even if it would be gdi and a tala, meaning normatively, says Rabbi Yirmiyah, what Rav would read into the Mishnah is that, into this brisa, is that a transfer of flavor through odor is absolutely possible. In this case, there is no concern of that because we've built a wall in between. We built a wall, but nevertheless, you still cannot do that. You can't have it in the same thing, same large roasting area. Even if you have a mechitza in the middle, you have to have them totally separated because you're worried that you're going to get confused between whose belongs to who. Amar of Mari says of Mari Ketanai. Maybe this machlokes in Rav and Levi, whether Reicha Milsa or Reicha Lav Milsa, this is really a machlokes Tanaim. What's the machlokes Tanaim? Haroide pas chama, a person that peels off hot bread. The way that they would make bread, we have this phrase throughout Shas called rudias hapas, which is to take down the bread. The way that they would do it is they would have these large earthenware ovens with a hole in the top of it and a fire at the bottom. They were huge. And then what you would do is people would dive in and stick dough on the inside of it. I'll see if I can send a video out maybe a little later. Already pas chama. You take the bread, you stick it to the bottom of, stick it to the underside of the oven, and then to take it out, that's called harede pas chama. So you pull it out, and it would be very, very hot. So what do you do with this now that it's hot? So v'nasa api chavis yain shel truma, and then you put it on top of a barrel of wine of truma. So you have this very hot bread that you put on top of a barrel of wine of truma. Remeir says the whole thing is aser. The whole thing is aser. Why? Clearly because there's the yain of truma. The flavor of the yain of truma is going to waft into this hot bread. Rabbi Yehuda matir. Rabbi Yehuda says the whole thing is mutter. Rabbi Yosi matir b'shel chitin. Rabbi Yosi says it's a little different. If the bread is made out of wheat, that would be permissible. But if it's made out of barley, no go. It would be also. Why? Because the barley will absorb those flavors that are coming out of the wine. My love tanahi. So is this not machlokes tanaim? The Marsava Reicha Lav Milsi, Marsava Reicha Milsi. Meir holds that Reicha is obviously a thing. Reicha is a milsa. That the odor, that even though there's no liquid medium, and even though there is no cooking that's happening here, this hot bread is going to absorb the flavors. So he holds Reicha Milsa. And Rabbi Yehuda says Reicha Lav Milsa. Rabbi Yossi says in theory Reicha Milsa, but not in all cases. The Levi says the Gemara, Levi Vadei Tanahi. Levi has to concede that this is a machlokes Tanai. Meaning, because Remer does obviously disagree with him. Levi has to say that Reicha is Lav Milsa. Levi Vadei Tanahi. Levi has to concede that Remer holds that Reicha is a Milsa. But the question is according to Rav. The Rav name Tanai. Should we say that Rav also holds that this is machlokes Tanaim? Meaning, does Rav concede to the Shita of Levi that some of the Tanaim, meaning Rabbi Yehuda, namely, holds that Reicha Lav Milsa? Says the Gemara, Amalach Rav. Rav would say to you, no, that's not true. The Kule Amar Reicha Milsi. Everybody agrees that Reicha is Milsa. Remer clearly does. So does Rabbi Yehuda, and so does Rabbi Yossi. So Reicha Milsi. Lav Idmar Allah Dahai. With regards to Rabbi Yehuda's halacha, says the Gemara on behalf of Rav, Lav Idmar Allah Dahai. Did we not say about this din of Rabbi Yehuda? Amar Rabbi Bar Rechana, that which Rabbi Bar Rechana said, Amar Reish Lakish, the name of Reish Lakish, but pas chama v'chabes psucha, that this is only talking about a case of pas chama, of hot bread, v'chabes psucha, and an open barrel. Divrei hakol aser. In such a case, everybody's going to say that it's aser. Meaning Remer, obviously, but also Rabbi Yehuda and also Rabbi Yossi. Divrei hakol aser. But pas tzenenes, if it is cold bread, v'chabes megufa, and sealed barrel, Divrei hakol mutter. Everybody agrees that it's mutter. The machlokes is with hot bread and a chavis chasuma and a sealed barrel. Or in a case of cold bread and an open barrel. Hanami, in this case, so that in this case, it is, and this is the machlokes between Rav and between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir. Hanami kepas chama u'chametz psucha dami. Is this going to be considered to be like hot bread in an open barrel? Meaning, how concerned do we have to be that the odor is going to penetrate a closed barrel? That it's going to penetrate a closed barrel, and how concerned do we have to be that cold bread is going to absorb odors? That's the machlokes. It's just a question of what the line is with regards, according to Rav, what the line is with regards to where do we assume that the odor is going to penetrate. Tani Rav Kahana Bered Rav China Saba. Rav Kahana, the son of Rav China Saba, taught as follows: Pas she'afa im tzli betana. If you baked bread with a roasted while roasting meat in an oven, asur la'achla b'kutcha, you cannot then eat that bread together with kutach, with a cheese dip. You can't have it with cheese. Hahi binisa, and if you have a fish, the hahi binisa, the itva bahadi bisra, and if you have fish that was roasted in the same oven as meat, asur rabba mi parzikia lemechla bekutcha. Rabba Parzikia said that you are not allowed to eat this with kutach as well, meaning meat was roasted in the same oven as fish. That fish is now also for you to eat with cheese. Mar bar of Ashi Amar, Mar bar of Ashi tells us, Afilu b'milcha nami asura, you are also not allowed to eat it with salt, mishum dekashal recha, because that's harmful to your sense of smell, meaning that that's a separate concern for health benefits, and for something else. What's the something else in this case? We saw something else earlier. Something else here, Rashi says, is tzaras. Now, the question is, how do we paskin? Do we paskin, meaning these last two cases here, before the very last case of the meat and the fish in the same oven, bread being baked in the same oven as tzli, as something that's being roasted, does that, in fact, transfer flavor? Do we say recha milsa or recha lav milsa? Rashi, uncharacteristically here, has a discussion that is almost sounds like the Taisus. Almost sounds like the style of the Balei Taisus. Rav holds that all of the Tanaim hold that Recha Milsa. Says the Rashi over here, "V'taimed de Rav Yehuda mishum de pas senenes the migufi v'loy alba Recha dami de Lav Allah v'chule." Now Rashi says as follows. Now this is the key halach lemaisa. Says Rashi, "V'avagav de kaimi tanai kavase de Rav," and even though we have a better argument for Rav, meaning Rav can explain all of the Tanaim to hold like him, versus Levi, who has to say that there's machlekes Tanaim. Hilchas hakavasa de Levi. In this case, we paskin not like Rav, we paskin like Levi. Because the machlekes between Rav and Levi was also, like 4 or 5 generations later, debated between Abai and Rava. Gabe Bastib Maseches Avodah in Avodah Zarah on Daf Samach Vavam Beis. V'kamle Rava b'shita say the Levi, and Rava comes out holding like Levi. V'amar, and he says Recha lav milsi, that Recha is not a thing. V'abai v'Rava hilchas Rava, and the halacha is whenever you have a machlokes between Abai and Rava, the halacha is like Rava. V'chein hu b'tshuvas ha'ga'onim, and this is what we have in the tshuvas of the Ga'onim as well. V'av mishmai shel Rabbi Eliezer ben Yitzchak nemar li delay chaysle, and I heard in the name of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yitzchak that we pass it like Rava and we pass it like Levi, Recha Lav Milsi, and this you find in the Chuvas Haganim as well. I mean, Rashi is telling you here that even though by reading this Gemara you would be pretty convinced that we pass it like Rav over Levi, because that's the shita that the Gemara seems to be favoring here, explaining that Rav can explain the Tanaim all better according to his shita, and Levi has to consider this machlokes Tanaim. And at the end of this Gemara is telling you about Marbar Rav Ashi and Rav China Saba, that they all seem to be holding like the sheet of Rav, not the sheet of Levi. Says Rashi, yeah, but in Avodah Zarah, Abai and Rava have the same machlokes, and we pass like Rava over Abai. Okay, Then we are onto the Mishnah. The Mishnah says as follows: Chamisha dvarim ba'in betuma. There are 5 things that are brought in a state of tumah. Ve'enim ne'achalim betuma, and they cannot be eaten in a state of tumah. Meaning they can be brought in a state of tumah, but not eaten in a state of tumah. What are they? They are the omer, the korban omer, shtei alechem, the korban omer brought on the 2nd day of Pesach, the shtei alechem, the 2 loaves of bread that were brought on Shavuos, the lechem apanim, and the showbread that was brought from week to week in the Beis Hamikdash, ve'zivchei shalom tzibur, and the sacrifices that were brought as shalom tzibur on behalf of the whole community, which is on Shavuos. Those were brought with the shtei halechem, u'seir resh chodashim, and the seirim, the goats that were brought, zirei chatas, they were brought on Rosh Chodesh. And then the Mishnah says that we have one exception to this rule. Pesach sheba b'tumah, Pesach that came in a state of tumah, as we've discussed before, nechal b'tumah is allowed to be eaten in a state of tumah, sheloi ba midchilasei ela lachila, because the halacha is that the Pesach is only brought for the sake of eating it, and therefore, if it is brought in a state of tumah, it can be eaten in a state of tumah as well. Says the Gemara, chamisha l'miutimai. These 5 things, what does it exclude? Meaning, you're saying 5 to exclude what? L'miute chagigas chamisha asar. That excludes, that we've discussed before, the chagiga that is brought on the 15th day of the month of Nisan. The same thing would be true about other korbanos as well. That if that would fall out on a Shabbos or in a state of tumah, as we'll see, these 2 things are neck and neck, that chagigas chamisha also cannot be brought in the state of tumah. The Chamina, I would have thought, Kevin the korban tzibur, since it is a public korban, meaning every Jew has to bring it. Not that it is brought on behalf of the tzibur, but the korban tzibur means everybody has to bring it. And it has a specific appointed time, has to be brought every Yom Tov. Tilchi tumah, it should push away the tumah. Kamash malan, the Mishnah is telling us, Kevan the islay tashlum kol shiva, since you can bring it for 7 days, you have time. Even on Shavuos, you have 7 days. Even though Shavuos is 1 day, you can bring the chagiga for the next 7 days. Loidachi, Shabbos is not going to push aside Shabbos. Umi the Shabbos loidachi, and since it doesn't push away Shabbos, loidachi tumah, it doesn't override tumah either. Says the Gemara, v'nesi nami seir regalim. Why didn't the Mishnah also tell me the seirim of the regalim, the goats that are brought on each of the Yom Tovim, that you have the seirim that are brought, the seir chatas that are brought on every Yom Tov, like the psukim in Parashas Pinchas tell us. So hatani le zivchei shalom tzibur, but it does say the zivchei shalom tzibur. Does say the zvachim that are brought to the shalom tzibur. So ihachi, if this is so, seir rosh chodashim nami lo nitni. If this is true, so then why are you telling me about the seirim of Rosh Chodesh? So if zivchei shalom tzibur includes even the seir regalim, so then it would include the seir rosh chodashim. What meaning? Are they include all of it or not? So it's because you already taught public offerings that are that are brought shalom tzibur. So I'll say that you need to teach the seirim of Rosh Chodesh. Why? Turning on to Ein Zayin Amud Aleph, I would have thought because it doesn't say moed with regards to the seir Rosh Chodesh. Kamash Malan. The Mishnah is coming to tell us the Rosh Chodesh ikri moed, that Rosh Chodesh is called a moed as well. And Abai will just lost the next 2 lines. Abai, like Abai told us, the Omar Abai said, Thomas the high shata meluya, that the Tammuz of the year that the Meraglim were sent, that Tammuz was 30 days. It wasn't 29 days, it was 30 days. That's called the Milui. It was a full month. Tichsiv, as the pasuk says, Kara alai moed lishbar bachurai. They called upon me a moed. The pasuk in Eicha, they called upon me a moed lishbar bachurai, in order to break my young men. And that moed is the Rosh Chodesh Tammuz of that year that the Jewish people were in the Midbar, and that's where it's called moed, talking about that month. Rosh Chodesh is called a moed as well. And Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, we will continue with learning out all of these dinim. Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach tomorrow. Looking forward to seeing everybody there. And a Freilichen Chanukah.